Hi guys, welcome back to the Rugby Psychology Series. Let's talk about group dynamics, this idea of team building. How important is it? Do coaches need to go out of their way to try and build a team, or will it happen just naturally if they concentrate on trying to win rugby matches? But let's look at some theory, and I'd love to know your guys' opinions and your experience of team building. What works, what doesn't work, and how much of this theory do you need to pay attention to? So first of all, let's talk about Tuckman's 4 stages of group development. Now the first one we don't tend to see in rugby, certainly not in international rugby. Normally the forming has happened already, and it's an ongoing thing where you start to replace players as they get older, retire or get dropped. Sometimes we see it. For example, France under Saint-André pretty much wiped the slate clean, started with a whole new group of players. It wasn't working for France before then. It was definitely the right time to do it. Normally, you'll only see that in extreme circumstances, but let me know if you've been through a stage where a whole new team has been formed. Maybe it is a completely new concept. Maybe it's a team that refreshes every year or every 2 years, some sort of representative team. I'd love to know. But normally where we pick it up in international rugby is the storming phase. This is a very dynamic phase where people are trying to work things out. A lot of stuff gets thrashed out. For example, relationships between players and coaches. They get used to their strategies, their tactics, all the moves they're going to use, and try and get it all down, nailed down, so it gets into the next phase. Now, I think this storming phase gets used as a bit of an excuse as well sometimes. Of course, teams have to go through it to get to their norms, but the term transition is used a lot for this phase, and it can go on for years, this excuse, if you like, we're in transition, where really what they're saying is we can't get out of the storming phase. For example, maybe Wales moved into the storming phase with Wayne Pivac, but it's been going on a bit too long, and I wouldn't say they've got to their norms of performance yet. So let me know if you think your team's stuck in that phase of storming under the excuse of transitions. Now ideally, most teams will spend the majority of their time in the norming phase where things are pretty much settled. They know what their best team is. Maybe a few players go in and out, a bit of rotation, but they know their systems. They're very comfortable in what they're doing. I think we saw that with Ireland this year in the Six Nations, where they all seemed very, very comfortable with all their defensive and attacking systems. It looked really nice. And even when they're not super slick, you can win ugly when you establish those norms, if you like. France did that, I think, as well this year. Now, where everyone wants to go at some point is into the performing phase. Now, I say some point because it's often called peaking. Now, I think in elite sport these days, we appreciate you can't stay at the absolute top forever. Certainly, there's limited emotional energy at top level rugby. You can't go to the well of that emotional energy every single time. And with the advent of serious performance analysis, teams also don't want to give away all their tactics, all their best plays straight away. So they will look to try and peak in big events like the World Cup. And I believe these days they're actually looking to peak a bit less often and maybe not even focusing on things like the Six Nations as much as they used to. Let me know if that annoys you. One interesting example, before New Zealand went on their back-to-back World Cup wins, it looked like they were peaking between World Cups, and then when it came to the World Cup, they weren't quite where they needed to be, having been the best side between the World Cup. So certainly getting to that performing stage and timing it is absolutely crucial. So let me know where you think your team is, your nation is at the moment. Which phase is it in? Has it been in that phase for too long? Is it on track, or is it maybe going a bit too fast and peaking a bit too early? Now let's move on to this idea of group cohesion. Coaches are forever trying to get their teams together on the same page. And it's really, really important. And it's also linked to this phrase culture. We hear that a lot in rugby. Maybe some coaches in professional rugby have become a bit too obsessed in trying to pursue culture. Maybe some coaches in professional rugby have become a bit too obsessed in trying to force culture onto a side. Certainly having a good culture is great, but we saw the different approaches. Maybe with Stuart Lancaster under England, went big into forming a culture, doing a lot of processes to try and get culture, maybe artificially. Eddie Jones came in and said, stuff that, we're here to play rugby and the culture will come from winning and just doing the things we need to do. Very interesting approaches. Let me know which side of the divide you lie on. Certainly a few years ago, I interviewed a submarine officer, actually, a nuclear submarine officer, believe it or not, and I was asking about this idea of culture and a team because, when you're stuck under the water, it's really important to have a cohesive team. And he was going on about that actually they don't pursue team building or anything like that. They stick to the basics, discipline, order, everyone knows a role. And if you're nice and settled in that respect, then the culture is pretty straightforward. So I think maybe there's a lesson for rugby teams there, rather than going off on SAS, team building camps or go camping or something like that. Maybe they need to concentrate on the basics and the culture comes a bit easier. That's just my opinion. I'd love to know what you guys think. But there are definitely two sides to cohesion. We've got social cohesion, we've got task cohesion. And in rugby, especially at lower levels, being cohesive socially, enjoying socially interacting with each other is a big thing. And it is possible to stick together as a team, even if you don't win cups and leagues and things like that. But research consistently shows at the elite level, the social cohesion is much less important, quite a lot less important. And actually, being cohesive towards a particular task, a vision, whatever you want to call it, is more important, be that a World Cup or achieving world number one, whatever it is. I mean, take the advantage of the Man United team in the heyday, the likes of Keane, Cole, York, Ronaldo, for example. Reportedly in books and things, they didn't get on great off the pitch, not all of them, but they did have a shared task cohesiveness, trying to win titles, which they did, and that's what drove that team forward, not the fact that they were going out socially with each other all the time. Now, one little example in this Six Nations of a bit of a lack of cohesiveness in a team was in Scotland when we saw their senior players deliberately breaking the team rules, going out when they shouldn't. That lack of cohesion between the senior players, the coaches, maybe a slight disrespect for the team. I don't know what it is. It was a bit of a strange one. Certainly some things aren't quite right in the Scotland camp. Let me know if you think it's some sort of cohesion there towards the task. A lot of people saying they don't quite know the identity of the Scottish team, what their actual goals are, what the realistic goals are. Maybe there's something to be learned from that. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is some of the pitfalls that coaches are desperately trying to avoid when we're talking about groups. Now, rugby is a highly interactive sport. A coactive sport is when you kind of add up scores together and it's kind of a team, like a gymnastics team or something like that. Rugby is highly interactive. One person getting something right or wrong is the difference between a good and bad performance. We see it, one defensive bad read and it's a try, you lose the game, all of that sort of thing. 15, 23 players on a match day, 30 odd when you're talking about the squad. You are prone to losses in the group. We've got an effect called the Ringleman effect, which is quite a fun one. As a group grows in size, you are prone to more losses. The individual contribution is slightly less as you start to get lost within the group. You do get motivational losses, coordination losses. I mean, in rugby, you've got lots of coordination that you could lose. The line out, for example, defensively. Motivational losses tend to make up most of this Ringleman effect. Players don't feel like they're being held accountable. They can hide a little bit. Maybe if they don't feel appreciated by the coach, that's something you've got to watch out for. So let me know if you see a little bit of that in your team. What teams try and do to mitigate against these problems, like social loafing, where you're hiding in the group, is serious performance analysis. And we saw that in the Six Nations when Finn Russell in one game was a bit lazy getting back in line. He was absolutely hammered on TV, if you like, and in team rooms. Anything like that will be picked up. Things we don't see often is how hard players work off the ball, their actual stats. And they just can't get away with these losses, if you like, these team losses. So coaches are super hot on that, but let me know if you know any players in your international teams that you think are just holding the team back slightly. Anyway, guys, let me know what you think. Do you believe in this idea of trying to build a team, literally overtly going out and doing things to get people together cohesively? Or should you just let it happen naturally? Should you just pick your best players and the performances on the pitch will help that culture grow? Where do you think the balance lies? And let me know your experiences of teams that have worked and why, and teams that haven't worked and why. Anyway, guys, all the comments below, and I'll catch you next time.